Okay, today we're going to talk about how to find volume in three different three-dimensional objects, the cone, the cylinder, and the sphere. This is probably a review for most of you. We'll get into some more difficult problems on the second page, so if you're pretty good at finding volume in all three of these shapes, feel free to fast forward to the second page when we're finding the height or the radius of these shapes. But let's focus in on finding the volume. Now, the important factor in finding volume is whether or not we're going to be using 3.14 for pi, or whether or not we just use the symbol pi and let the symbol stay as is. So we'll do a couple of both in the problems below. So let's get started. So if you take a look at the first problem here, we have a cylinder. And I've already wrote down the formula for a cylinder. It's volume equals pi r squared h. So in this first problem, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. So all I do is replace all the variables with the appropriate information from the shape to do the volume problem. So let's get started. So volume equals pi, I know, is 3.14. The radius, well, I get the radius from right here. Now, this 30 represents the diameter, which is all the way across. Well, I don't want the diameter, I want the radius, and I know the radius is half that. So half of 30 is 15. So that's times 15 squared. Then times the height, which is 50. So now I just take my calculator and I multiply 3.14 times 15 squared times 50. When I do that, I get a volume of 35,325. Okay, so there's the volume of the cylinder. So let's take a look at the cone. So the volume, the formula for a cone is as follows. The only difference is it's just 1/3 of the cylinder formula. And we learned why back in February about why it is 1/3. So let's go ahead and use this. So this time I'm going to use the pi symbol. I'm not going to use 3.14. I'm going to leave pi as is. So it's going to be 1/3 pi. The radius I can see over here is 8. It's going to be times 8 squared. Times the height, which I can see again from the picture, is 12. So times 12. So I'm going to enter 1/3 times 8 squared times 12 in my calculator. Do not enter 3.14 or the pi symbol in your calculator. Just leave pi be, kind of ignore it for right now. So when you enter all of these, or 1/3 times 8 squared times 12, you end up getting 256 pi. Okay, and that's actually our final answer. And you'll see why that's advantageous on the next page to leave the symbol pi. Okay, taking a look down at the sphere. Okay, the sphere has the formula 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, get my colors, there we go. So let's go ahead and do this formula. So it's going to be 4/3. And I'm going to leave pi as is. And the radius I get from the picture, well, it's saying the diameter is 12. So if the diameter is 12, that means that the radius is 6 to the third power. So that means 6 times 6 times 6. So now go ahead and you would enter 4/3 times 6 cubed. Just leave pi as is. Do not enter into the calculator. And when we do that, we end up getting 288 pi. So that would be your final answer there. Okay, let's take a look at the next section. So I want to find the volume of these three shapes below. Again, here's the cylinder. The formula is up at the top of the page. So let's go ahead and do this one. Find the volume. Volume is going to be pi. So I'm going to use 3.14 this time. There's no reason why. I'm just saying I'm going to use 3.14 times the radius. Well, the radius is going to be half this 10. So half that 10 is 5. So it's going to be times 5 squared times the height, which is 18. Go ahead and enter all those in the calculator. 3.14 times 5 squared times 18 is 1413. And there's your final answer there. Okay, the next one, part B, the cone. So the volume is 1/3 times pi. This time I'm going to leave the symbol pi. Again, no reason. I'm just choosing to do that just so you see it. Times the radius squared. Well, the radius is 7. Times the height, which is 10. So again, in this case, I'm going to enter 1/3 times 7 squared times 10. I will not enter pi into the calculator. Just leave it be. It's just going to be part of your answer. When you do that, you end up getting volume equals 163.3 repeating pi. Okay, and that's your final answer. Just leave it as is. Now take a look at C. We're trying to find the volume of the sphere. So sphere, that's going to be volume equals 4/3 times 3.14 times 8 cubed. Remember, make sure you use cubed there. You may have to find the rooftop button on your calculator. It's usually around the 7, diagonal from the 7, or just do 8 times 8 times 8. So when you enter 4/3 times 3.14 times 8 cubed into your calculator, you end up getting volume equals 2143.6. Okay, and finally the last two down here. I've already got the problems written out. Here we're trying to find the volume of a cone. The height's 20, the radius is 4, so I put them in. So 1/3 times the pi symbol times my radius squared times the height. So you would just enter 1/3, 4 squared, and 20 into the calculator. And when you do that, you should get volume equals 106.6 repeating pi. Okay, take a look at the letter E. Same thing. Here I'm doing a cylinder. Well, the formula for a cylinder is pi r squared h. So pi is 3.14. My radius is going to be 6 squared because the diameter is 12, so the radius is 6. It's always going to be half that. So 6 squared times 8. So your final volume is 904.32. Okay. All right. So that's just basic finding the volume problems. Again, whether or not you use 3.14, whether or not you use the pi symbol, will either be up to you, or they'll just go ahead and tell you to use 3.14 or to use the pi symbol. So let's take a look at the next problems here of finding the height and radius. So this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. So let's get started here. So take a look at the number 1. If you take a look at number 1, here I've got a cylinder. And the piece of cylinder that is missing is the height. We don't know what the height is. We know the volume, but we don't know the height. Now, take a look at the volume. Please notice they leave pi as a symbol. That's going to come in handy because that's going to tell us that the symbols are going to disappear on their own. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Some of you may remember this from we did this in the winter time. So up here I've got the formula for volume. So volume equals pi r squared h. So I'm going to go ahead and write down the volume. We know the volume is 112 pi equals, well, formula is pi, so I'm going to leave the symbol pi, r squared, so that's times 4 squared times the height. We don't know what the height is, so the h just stays there. This is what we're going to solve for. So let's simplify. 4 squared I know is 16, so it's 112 pi equals 16 pi times h. Now here's where it being a symbol is going to be advantageous to us. So now we're going to divide both sides by 16 pi. And what you'll notice is that these pi symbols actually cancel. They're gone. They go away. So now you just have 112 divided by 16. That equals 7. So 7 equals the height. Okay. Take a look at number 2. Again, we're finding the height for a cylinder. Here is the formula for a cylinder. It's up here. Volume equals pi r squared h. And again, you'll notice pi is a symbol, so I will not use 3.14. So let's get started. So that's 432 pi equals pi. Well, what's the radius? It's saying the diameter is 6. I'm sorry, it says the diameter is 12, so that means the radius is 6. So times 6 squared times the height. So let's simplify the right. So that's going to be 36 pi, because 6 squared is 36 pi h. And now we'll divide both sides by 36 pi. And when you do that, the pi symbols disappear, which is nice and convenient. So 432 divided by 36 is 12. So 12 equals our height. Okay, so just a little bit of algebra and finding the volume or finding the height of these objects. Now, the last type of problem we're going to see is finding the radius, which is probably the most difficult of the three things we're doing today: finding volume, finding height, or finding radius. Just one extra step involved, and again, it kind of takes us back to the Pythagorean unit of taking the square root of something. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3. Here again, I've got a cylinder. So here's the formula for a cylinder, and I want to find the radius. I know what the volume is, I know what the height is, but I don't know what the radius is. Okay, now you'll notice the symbol pi is not in the volume, so that means I'm going to use 3.14. I'm not going to use the symbol. So volume is 1570 equals 3.14 times r squared, don't know what it is, times 20. So I'm just going to clean this right side up by taking 3.14 times 20. When I do that, that's going to give me 62.8 times r squared. So now divide both sides by 62.8 because we want to get r by itself. And 1,570 divided by 62.8 is 25 equals r squared. Now, a lot of you would stop here and say, oh, the radius is 25. No, that's what the radius squared. So how do you find r when it's r squared? Well, just take the square root of that. And remember, the square root's asking what number times itself is the number in the box. Well, what number times itself is 25? That would be 5 equals the radius. Okay? All right, take a look at number 4. Here we have a cone, and notice the symbol pi is in our volume, so I will use the symbol pi and not 3.14. So hopefully the pi's cancel. So let's take a look at this one. So the volume is 294 pi equals 1/3 pi. I don't know what the radius is, so that's just going to stay r squared. And the height is 18, so I'm going to write 18 in there. So now I'm going to clean up the right side by multiplying 1/3 times 18. Those are the only numbers over here, so that's the only thing I'm going to multiply. 1/3 times 18. Some of you may need a calculator, some of you may not. So 1/3 of 18 is 6 pi r squared. Divide both sides by 6 pi. And the pi's cancel. Again, that's kind of nice. They go away on us. 294 divided by 6 is 49. It's 49 equal r squared. So again, 49 is not the answer. You got to take it one more step. How do you get r? Well, you got to take the square root of that. So 7 equals radius. Okay. All right, the last two. Number 5, finding the volume of a sphere. Now the sphere's maybe the most challenging because it's r cubed now. It's not r squared. So I got to find a cube root when I'm done. So the volume is 58. So here's the formula. So the volume is going to go right in here. 58 is going to go right here. I don't know what the radius is. So that's going to stay r. Notice there's no 3.14 in my... I'm sorry, there's no pi symbol in my volume, so I'm going to have to use 3.14. So let's go ahead and try that. So 58 equals 4/3 times 3.14 times r cubed. So 58 equals, well, 4/3 times 3.14 is 4.19 times r cubed. So divide both sides by 4.19. Remember, we're solving for r. And 58 divided by 4.19, put this over here, is 13.8 equals r cubed. Okay, so that is not the answer. I've got to take the cube root of this. So you can either ask Siri, what's the cube root of 3.18? Maybe put it into Google, what's the cube root of 13.8? If you have a calculator that can do it, usually you have to hit the second button, and then it's the x over the square root symbol. The final answer is 2.4 is the radius. Or feel free to estimate it if you want. Okay, number 6. A cone is 6.4 centimeters high. It has a volume of 150 centimeters cubed. Calculate the radius of the cone. So I'm looking for the radius. So the volume is 150 centimeters cubed. So it does not have the pi symbol, so I will be using 3.14. So 150 equals 1/3 times 3.14 r squared, and the height they said is 6.4. So clean up the right side by taking 1/3 times 3.14 times 6.4, and you get 6.7 times r squared. Divide both sides by 6.7. And you get 22.4 equals r squared, I'm sorry. So again, not my final answer. I've got to take the square root to find my final answer. And the square root of 22.4 is 4.7 is our radius. Okay? So your assignment is to complete pages 3 and 4. You'll be finding volume, you'll be finding radiuses, and you'll be finding heights. Feel free to refer back to this. Just be careful when to use a symbol, when to use 3.14. And when you're finished, please upload this to Schoology. All right. Any questions? As always, feel free to email or jump onto one of our office hours. Okay. Good luck.